Keeping your home clean and clutter-free doesn't mean to say that you need to spend hours and hours at a time. So in this video, I'm going to talk you through some really simple 1-minute habits that will keep your home tidy and clutter-free. So the first habit is, if you notice that something needs to be put away or tidied up, do it there and then. What I've noticed for me is that usually there are lots of little things that I could get done in under a minute that I put off, I procrastinate, because in that moment I feel that I just can't be bothered. So if I know that it's only going to take me a short amount of time, whether it's putting dishes in the dishwasher, putting some important paperwork away, it may feel like a lot of effort in that moment, but once it's done, you can forget about it. Habit number 2 is to throw away any expired food. Now, I don't like wasting food, so ideally I want to use it before it expires, but unfortunately there are times where I find food, whether it's in the fridge or tins or jars in the cupboard, that have long since expired. So it might be helpful to regularly just have a look in the fridge, have a look in your cupboards, just to see if the things in there are still in date, they're okay to eat, or whether it's high time that you put them in the bin. If you find you are having quite a few expired foods, there might be things you can do to avoid that. So for example, we were buying quite big bags of spices because it was cheaper than buying the small jars. But what we found was that we weren't using enough of the spices before they ran out. So even though it's probably a bit more expensive, we do buy the jars or the small plastic tubs of spices because we know we will use them that way. Another thing might be to cook up the food that you intend to use but may not need to use that week and freeze it. And once you've frozen it, if you forget about it for a little while, it's not going to be such a big deal as if it's sitting in the fridge going off. Habit number 3 is to wipe down any counters or tidy up after you've used them. And again, this is one of those things where I think I just can't be bothered to do this, but if I do it when it's in my mind, it doesn't take me long and I feel much better because the place looks tidier and I don't need to think about it again until I use it again. Habit number 4, which I know some people roll their eyes at, is to make your bed daily. Not just because it looks tidier, although I do think when you make your bed, it makes the whole room look far tidier, but also there's something psychological about making your bed. For me anyway, making my bed is a really easy way to achieve something early on in the day, and it's such a quick thing to do. Let me know down in the comments if you've got any 1-minute habits that you do to keep your home tidy and clutter-free. Habit number 5 is to create a drop zone for your stuff. So for example, we've got a wooden dish in the kitchen where we put all our keys, because before they were just sort of getting scattered around on the kitchen counter. You might want to have specific drop zones for things like clothes that you want to declutter, or perhaps paperwork that you don't want, that needs shredding or that can just go in the recycling. Have a designated spot for it rather than things being scattered around the home. And that way you know where to put it, and you can make a habit of dealing with what is ever in the drop zone perhaps once a week, so that you keep on top of the clutter. Habit number 6 is to put your coat and shoes away as soon as you get home. I used to be pretty bad at this, and I'd sort of just leave my coat on the sofa and kick my shoes off in the living room, and it'd make the place look really untidy. It's good if you've got a designated place for your coats and shoes, so that when you come in, it's the first thing you do and you can forget about it for the rest of the evening. Habit number 7 is to deal with mail as soon as it comes in. So again, you might want to create a drop zone for this, but for me, I like to put takeaway or takeout menus in the recycling. When I've got some important bills, I like to put them away in my designated folder if that's what I want to do, if I want to keep them, or I shred them if I really don't. With me, I find that if I leave paperwork somewhere for too long, it just attracts other lots of paperwork until it can get a bit of a mess. So what I like to do is sift through whatever comes in on the day and deal with it, so that I don't have a pile of paperwork cluttering up the kitchen counter, and essentially it ends up annoying me and getting in the way anyway. And if you want some tips on how you can declutter fast, then check out the video that's on the screen. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.